Hello, and welcome to Kickstart, a show profiling successful startups and the stories behind their founders. Today, I'm joined with Mark Dalton of AutoDeploy. Hi, Mark.
Hey, Patrick. Thanks for having us.
Yeah. Why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself to the viewers and tell us about your background, about AutoDeploy, and
Sure. So I started my career working for AT&T Broadband, and we designed the E911 system for AT&T. So it's really sending out push notifications for people about alerts for potential, there could be an earthquake or there are fires, things like that.
Yeah.
And so, and then you have to isolate by geographic location and things like that. So we started working there. JD Edwards, which is what we're going to talk about here shortly. They reached out to me and they wanted a development role, sort of a hybrid customer-facing, internal-facing, but also a dev role, and manage a team of people. And so that's I started working at Edwards, worked there up until right before the PeopleSoft merger, and then I went to go work in industry in the oil and gas space.
Nice. So when that PeopleSoft merger happened, did Oracle, it was pretty quick, right? PeopleSoft got JD Edwards and then Oracle bought PeopleSoft?
Right, yeah. So it was a whole weird situation that happened.
Yeah. How was that being a part of that?
I wasn't. So I was I was kind of fortunate in a way because I left about 3 months before PeopleSoft acquired Edwards. And then with the whole Oracle acquisition, I wasn't a part of any of that.
So what was your experiences at JD Edwards like? What kind of work did you do there and how did it shape sort of your future moving forward?
Sure. So that's a great question. It sounds really presumptuous to say this, but like, our team, what we did is we built Salesforce before Salesforce was a thing. So what we did is we aggregated all of the information internally. We had different types of applications that customers would run on their installations, and we would extract that information, bring it into consolidated view so that you would have, for instance, if I am a support rep and I get a call from a customer, I can go look at an entire manifest of this customer's history, all the issues that they've had. Maybe they're having the same issue repeatedly, so that you can create proactive engagement with the customer. And then also from a sales perspective, you create a portfolio that sales reps can then look at and say, oh, okay, well, I see that customers are calling about XYZ issue. And then they can then go out and proactively engage with the customer to say, hey, I see that you're having an issue here with warehouse management.
Yeah.
Right? Okay. Maybe there's an opportunity for us here to dimension our engagement with you in a little bit of a different way.
Very cool. Were there any businesses or software out there at the time that you guys were kind of taking inspiration from, or were you sort of like leading the charge on that one?
That's a great question. It was really driven internally by two other folks who, we conceptualized it, and we didn't know Salesforce. We had no idea, and internally to JD Edwards, we were doing everything web native, which client server was the model that they were operating off of. So it was a big change internally for the organization to adopt that type of mentality.
So what was the next step after that for you?
Yeah, so I actually was talked with my boss, and he said, you really need to have field experience. So go work with a customer, see what it's like implementing these large software packages.
The only way you can become more experienced is by getting in front of that customer,
Right, exactly. So I was really fortunate to have a boss who was supportive and wanting to see me advance through my career. And so I was very lucky to be able to go work for a company in the oil and gas space. Spent 3 years working with them and doing the actual implementation work, and then post-implementation support, and getting that whole experience down. So you're really seeing the day in and day out pain points that customers are working through and issues that they're trying to resolve, and how they resolve them and how they address them.
Yeah, very cool. So this is a show about startups, and I'm curious, I feel like a lot of successful startups, they always have a moment, an aha moment, where they kind of identified the need and they said, hey, I can solve this. Right. What was that moment for you? Can you explain sort of like what was going on in your life at the time and the risks that were involved sort of for taking them?
Sure. So Well, the aha moment was at the Indianapolis Conrad Hotel, and we were working on a project. I was managing a project for an oil and gas company, a very large firm, and they had outsourced their change management process to a third-party vendor. So it was all manual.
Yeah.
And as you're going through these large projects, you need your code to be built, deployed, and you expect it to be built and deployed in the correct environments, right? And we ran into just a number of issues with having that as a manual process, but also having it as a manual process that's been outsourced. And so for us, we were talking, the co-founder of my company and I were talking about how can we alleviate that friction, because I wasn't getting the work product that I needed delivered on a consistent basis.
Yeah.
And really the discussion shifted to, hey, we can automate this whole process. Well, what does that really look like? And then as we're doing this multi-state, multi-location rollout of the software, what's it going to take to start a company at the same time doing that? And so I was really fortunate, the co-founder of my company, Jeb Benbow, he was really super supportive of seeing the current project that we were working on, seeing that through, but then also, working to get the company structured, set up. I mean, all of the blocking and tackling that you have to go through to get that done. So it was like we had two projects going at the same time.
Now, were you still employed when you started AutoDeploy?
So we had our own company that was focused on oil and gas space.
Okay, cool. Yeah. What was going through your head when you decided, I'm going to do this? I'm going to stop working in the oil and gas space, and I'm going to go pursue this idea that I have. Were you confident about it? Did you know that it was going to work? Tell me about that.
Yeah, it's a fantastic question. Yeah, I was super confident that it would work because there's a need there in the market, right? Yeah. That every kind of one of these customers, ERP customers, have, right? Like, I want to be able to get my code on a continuous release cycle, but they really struggle with getting to that cadence. I think that we were a little early in terms of adoption in the ERP space for automation. Why do you think that is? I think that
companies weren't up to speed with technology, or
I think that there's once you hit a steady state with your ERP solution, you really don't. What we've seen is that customers are just really hesitant to want to make a change.
Yeah.
And so the idea that you could take this really complicated process and that you could fully automate it, so that you can just let something run like through a CI/CD pipeline, or you could do ad hoc build and deploys. It was I think it was a little bit difficult at first for customers to digest.
How do you approach that conversation? One, who are you talking to when you have that conversation with businesses, and how do you convince them that this is the right move for their business?
Well, I think that you have to look at how the business is dimensioned, right? So our conversations are with all types of different people within an organization. So we talk with developers, we talk with sysadmin, we talk with CIO, we talk with end users, business, CFO, et cetera. And it's really a way of what are they saying, right? Because they're all going to say like a unique type of thing.
Yeah, what specifics do they need? Yeah.
But it rolls up into really a common type of thematic of speed, cost, and governance and compliance.
Okay. So when AutoDeploy launched and you guys were a company, you're up and running, who was your first client? How did you get them? And what was that first engagement with? What were the pain points, the learning experiences? What was that like?
We were really, really lucky. Our first customer was a customer in Hawaii. So
it was a vacation.
Exactly. It was a vacation. So but the name of the company was Outrigger, and they were the CIO he was incredible. He said, and we had a pre-existing relationship with him, and but he was really interested in how he could lower his cost basis, how he could get his internal team
Yeah.
to understand the complexities of these, because these ERP packages, they can get very large and there are a lot of different moving parts, right? So to have his team to be able to put all of that together, he was skeptical, but he gave us a shot.
Yeah.
And so we did a 1 week on-site proof of concept. And it was great because he had just hired a new director of IT.
Perfect.
And so we, after, we got the software installed, which is really the easiest thing to do. The hardest part is how do you manage organizationally your change, right?
Yeah.
So we took the director of IT and we said, hey, you're going to go do this build and deploy for code base in your dev environment right now. And he was like, really nervous and rattled and everything. But since it's point and click, and for him to see that, and then for the CIO to see that, like right there, it was a shocking moment for them. And they were like, we're on board. We're ready to go.
That's awesome. So from the first client, you guys have had a pretty successful product. Has it gone through a lot of transformations, or has it been pretty much the same thing the whole time?
So well, we release our core product, our Envoy product, on a quarterly cycle. So we always have enhancements that we're pushing out.
And is that based on JDE and what's going on with their product, or you want to talk about your relationship with JDE?
So it's really more based on what our customers are telling us.
Okay.
Right? So if we have customers that say, hey, we want this piece of functionality, that's very important for us. And because we're a very customer driven organization. And so what we'll do is we'll take all of that information, and then, like everyone else, we use Jira. So we'll take all of that, we'll put it in Jira, and then we'll stack rank that, and we'll say, okay, here are the things that we think are important, but that might not align to what our customer base is telling us. And so we have to figure out, okay, well, what can we do in this quarter to release that's going to meet, the majority of what our customer demand is and the things that we think are cool that we should be releasing.
Yeah, so I think that could be a common problem with most startups, most new ideas, is kind of conveying to a business owner, to a CXO, that you think this is a great idea and why. Can you kind of talk about how you've had those conversations?
Well, we have those conversations weekly. It's daily, it seems. But I think the hardest thing is that there are so many good ideas, right? Like we have people internally that bring so many good ideas to us. And the hardest thing is to say no to an idea, right? Like, because if you say yes to everything, you're never really going to accomplish your objective. So I think that saying no and really working towards what is the core of the idea that you have. So, we've developed a process where, you can kick that off internally, but then it's going to go through a very thorough process to say, okay, you've thought of this one thing, but have you thought of the 100 dependencies that are associated with this? Okay, if you have, great. If you haven't, well,
that's why I'm here.
Right. So here might be a point that we need to really look at, and then does it really make sense for us to move forward with this? Are we going to be able to make money off of it? Are we going to be able to delight our customers with this? I mean, those are all real important questions that you have to ask yourself.
Do you can you think of any like milestones or big moments with AutoDeploy where you kind of had these ideas and these breakthroughs and implemented them?
I mean, obviously the start of the company and the start of the product. I think that what we have done and what we've seen is that, and we just didn't even know this quite honestly, and it's kind of embarrassing to say, but where you realize, hey, we're operating in this DevOps space, right? We're operating with this continuous integration, continuous delivery model, and so once we got our kind of sea legs, as they say, we started looking at, hey, where are other areas that we can extend out what we're doing conceptually with other software products. And so I would say that building our software on the Elastic framework, that was really a jumping off point for us to say, yeah, we can take our core product, but we can also, plug into Elastic, and we can do some really cool stuff with Elastic.
Awesome. So what's the current state of affairs over at AutoDeploy? How are you guys doing? You're headquartered in the Washington, D.C. area, correct?
So we're actually headquartered in Fort Worth, Texas.
Fort Worth, Texas,
Yeah,
okay.
I live in right outside of D.C. But so we're growing. We have our sales pipeline is solid. So that's one of the things I think for when you are in an entrepreneurial environment and you are in a startup environment, there's this reticence towards sales, right? Like because you think my product is so great, it should just sell itself, right? But getting it out there and really marketing it and then positioning it to a broader total addressable market, I think that's something that maybe a lot of entrepreneurs don't jump into, thinking that's something that you should spend a lot of time on, but for us it's something that we realize is obviously hugely important.
So are your is your sales all internal, or do you have partners, resellers? How's that structure look?
So we have omni-channel approach. Okay. So we have obviously our own internal process. We have partners that will sell with us. We have global partners. So for markets like in Europe, for instance, right? Like it's just going to be difficult for us to dedicate resources to sell into Europe. So we have partner relationships in Europe where they're using our software for their customers, but then they're also reselling our software for us.
Cool. Do you find it challenging to sort of enable those partners? Have you had trouble with that? I mean, your product is slightly complex, and you definitely need to know what you're talking about and what you're selling. How do you sort of work with your partners to make sure that they're successfully communicating the benefits of the product to the prospects?
That's always the struggle, isn't it? Right? It's really, you have to lock in a cadence where you're speaking with your partners with the regularity, and you're making sure that they understand your messaging and you understand their messaging. And then, are you aligned organizationally? Are your objectives aligned? If they're not aligned, your partners will always let you down. They will always be disappointed. But I think that if you really put in the time and the effort, and it takes, it's not easy, right? Because you're seeding your messaging in effect to this other party, and believing that they're able to deliver on that. And I think that it's just constant reinforcement and constant, here's the messaging, here's what we're working towards, here are our objectives. And we found that to be very successful.
What kind of marketing tactics do you guys approach to kind of get the word out about AutoDeploy?
So there's obviously social. Everyone does social, right? So there's that. We do. One of the things that I think that we've really done very well is we've been able to, back to kind of what we were talking about earlier, dissect those personas and then craft messages in different ways.
Sort of like account-based marketing.
Right, yeah, exactly. Nice. Account-based marketing.
Awesome. And that you've seen the most return on that?
Absolutely.
That's incredible.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, a developer is not going to respond to the same message as a CIO.
Yeah.
And then when and so when we started the company, we tried to do the generic emails and all that, and it was a wash.
Too broad a net, too broad a message.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Really hone in on what are the pain points that these folks are experiencing, and realize that you're going to have, different objectives. If I'm marketing to or messaging something to a developer, I realize that person doesn't have the ability to, write a check. It doesn't have budgetary authority. So get to the point of, I'm trying to influence this person so that they can realize that they can do their job better, quicker, faster, and they're going to be happier.
Yeah, the messaging is completely customized to the viewer.
Right.
It's awesome. So it's 2019. It's January of 2019. We have the whole year ahead of us.
It is.
What is your vision for this year for AutoDeploy? Where do you hope to be at the end of the year?
So I would say it's a vision that we've had since 2014, but it's really starting to come to fruition in 2019, and that's migration of ERP workloads to AWS or to Google Cloud. We formed really excellent strategic partnerships with both AWS and with GCP.
All right, and my last question, being a show about startups, what is your one piece of advice for future entrepreneurs who are maybe a little hesitant about chasing after their dreams and their ideas?
document everything, write everything down. You might have a great idea, but you might lose it in the process. And then as you're going through the process, you're going to want to make sure that you have everything documented so you can refer back to your notes to say, oh, here's the thing that, I thought we should have done, we didn't do. Well, why didn't we do it? And then work through that, your internal process. I would say that our internal documentation is very, very important for us because it helps us identify new areas of where we can, create new product to sell into.
Yeah.
But it also gives us the ability to be very reflective of here are the things that we didn't do, here's why. And then to reference those things going forward in the future. So documentation, write everything down, all of your ideas, put it into some central repository.
Yeah. Take notes.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, Mark, thank you for joining us. We appreciate it.
I appreciate your time.
Viewers as well, thank you. And we'll see you next time. Thanks.